Crystal Tower Information Whiskey 2153 Zulu, wind 060 at 5.
076 Mike Juliet, this is departure radar contact.
Hazardous weather information from Minnesota available on flight service frequency.
You've dialed in the Flying Midwest podcast, connecting aviators from across America's heartland, sharing news, information, and events from around the region.
Calling Nancy 53 on Overtower, Roger, turn left heading 070, runway 9er, clear for takeoff.
Sit back, relax, and join our crew for some hangar talk as we discuss a wide variety of regional aviation topics.
Archer 71143, flying flag, runway 280 left, quick takeoff, left hand southbound.
And now, from our home at the Anoka County Blaine Airport, our checklist is complete, and we're ready for departure for another episode of the Flying Midwest podcast.
Contact departure, every flight.
Welcome, everyone, to another fun and exciting episode of the Flying Midwest podcast. I am Jim, one of your hosts. I am joined on this fine evening by my great friend, the Badger pilot.
Oh, you actually introduced me first this time. That's exciting. How's
It's
it
only
going,
because Maddie's
Jim?
not here.
Right.
Welcome back. You weren't at the intro for our last episode, and we took some
I
liberties.
was not. Yes.
Did some-
Yes, you did.
Did some impressions.
It was great. I loved it.
Did you like how I retitled your video?
Yeah, it was a great title.
Teaching Myself Commercial Maneuvers, The Art of Primacy.
I actually almost went back and changed the title to add The Art of Primacy, but
That
by
would've
the time the episode came out, all of my views have since leveled off and nobody's watching it anymore. So maybe in a future video I'll have to steal it.
Okay. Do whatever you want. It's not copyrighted. You can take it.
All right.
Cool. And as we alluded, Maddie is not with us. I'm going to be nice to her, and I'm not going to do the same thing that we just did to you. Not because I wouldn't normally, but Maddie's got a lot of big news and some big changes on the horizon that I'm going to let her talk about in the next time she's on with us, but she's not available tonight because of those big changes and big news. So really excited for what she's got in store. And again, no spoilers. We're going to let her share that. It is her news to share, and I'm super excited to have her share it.
As am I. So what's new?
I've intended to work on the website a little bit and haven't. So our website is still kind of like half done. I just have to add some more specifics to each of the sections. And admittedly, I have noticed with some of our merch that if you wear them for too long, I don't like how they're wearing, I guess, as far as the quality. So I'm going to be looking a little bit at different vendors to try to switch up our merch. Hopefully before like AirVenture and summer and stuff like that. But I'm not thrilled with how they're wearing over time. So
Like the screen printing is
the screen printing, and I think like, that like bacon neck that you can kind of get with the around the collar where it kind of wrinkles in and all that stuff. It's not wearing how I would like it, and it's not necessarily up to snuff for what I would want our listeners to be purchasing. If they're going to spend their money to support us, I don't want to give them cheap garbage. So
sure. Granted,
I do wear them an awful lot, but still, I feel like they should last a little bit longer than this.
Yeah.
Jim's 2 cents on merchandise. The other thing could be some really big news that I'm working on a thing. I'm going to put it as that, where I've reached out. I've tried to do some logistical things and some arrangements, and I'm hoping it's going to come together. I'm really excited for the possibility of this big thing, but I don't want to say what the thing is just yet to the community in case the thing falls through. But I've had a lot of contacts the last couple of weeks with people in the aviation space to try to put something together. So super vague, super not giving you details right now, but I'm working on a thing.
It was vague enough that for like the first half of that, I wasn't even sure what you were talking about, but now I know.
You know about the thing because I've told you about the thing.
I know about the thing. Yes.
Okay. I'm hoping to hear back in the next week or two to solidify if this is a thing or not. If it's not a thing, please disregard everything that we've just said and carry about your day. Carry on about your day. Yeah, that's it. keep calm and carry on. How about you? What have you been up to?
Well, speaking about things that might not turn out to be things, I've started the planning for our second annual Flying Midwest podcast.
Yes, I saw some
Camping
commentary
Flying.
about that.
Yeah, and we have the date set. We have that much. So mark on your calendars August 29th through 31st. It's a Friday through Sunday, the last weekend before Labor Day.
Okay.
And for a lot of kids, the last weekend before they go back to school. And so just sort of a way to cap off the summer and certainly not put a close to flying season, but maybe a close of summer, so to speak. So we have a couple ideas in the works for locations, but nothing set in stone. It was brought to my attention that those dates potentially conflict with a different fly-in at the same weekend.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm not 100% sure what we're going to do, but at least the dates are set. So
Okay.
August 29th through 31st, mark them off in your calendar. Save it for flying somewhere.
Are we taking suggestions still, or do you have it kind of narrowed down to at least a rough region?
I am still very open to suggestions.
Okay.
I would love to branch out from Wisconsin just because we did it in Wisconsin. It's not the Flying Wisconsin podcast. It's
I would also like you to
Midwest
branch out
podcast.
from Wisconsin. Just
yes, I know you would. Yeah. But one of the hassles, so to speak, I still don't have an instrument capable plane, and so I'd like it to be sort of within driving distance.
Sure, just in case.
And yeah, because it would be kind of strange for the host of, or one of the hosts of the podcast that's hosting the fly-in to not be there. So
fair point. And I'll note that last year you put a ton of work into putting that together with Rich Wellner and Jeff and a few other people to make that thing happen. So to not have you there wouldn't feel right.
It might be better, but maybe not feel right.
Well, and I knew that I don't know if Maddie will be able to make it, but she didn't make last year either. So
yeah. Yeah, so that's the news with that. But outside of that, I've been flying quite a bit. Probably more, based on my upcoming fuel bill, definitely more than I have been the past few months. And the commercial training starting to really gear up. So that's exciting.
Are you actually doing it with an instructor now, or are you just...
I am, yes. Okay. I have an instructor. I've flown with him a few times. I'm not just teaching myself manovers.
I think the FAA is not going to let you sign yourself off on on your own stuff. You do need it as an instructor for certain things. So just putting that out there.
Yep.
Okay. Maddie, what are you up to? No, we weren't going to do this. I told her we are going to be nice because of her.
I'm just doing big things with big things. Big things with big things. That's good to hear, Maddie. Can't wait to hear more.
Yeah, we can. It's going to be terrific. Well, on this episode, we're going to do a bit of a solo show again, even though Maddie's not here. We did have an interview that we were going to have lined up, but it didn't feel right to do this specific interview with Maddie around. So Badger and I are just going to be left to our own devices and goof around. So I don't know if we have a responsible podcast member tonight, but we're going to see how this goes. At any rate,
it's funny you mentioned it. It's funny you mentioned we did have a guest lined up. Our guest doesn't know that we had them lined up. So
I'm going to cut all of that then. Maybe I'll just start over.
No, leave it in. It's fun. Guest, right, who is also a listener, you're on notice. You're next.
You were going to be a guest, but you didn't know you were going to be a guest. But
you
soon,
know who you are.
You'll be a guest. All right.
Yes.
At any rate, we tossed a couple ideas around this afternoon of what topics we might be able to cover for the sake of putting out an episode. Badger says he's indifferent. So we're going to be talking about the 5 hazardous attitudes of Badger. No, just kidding.
There's only 5? That's amazing.
Well, yeah, in the regs, there's 5.
I'm trying to find my sunglasses, but it doesn't matter because it's an audio-only format.
Correct. I made a stupid joke as we were talking about this. We're going to call this episode, I Wear My Sunglasses at Night. That's right. We're talking all about night flying, night operations. Maybe don't wear your sunglasses while you're actually flying at night, but we're going to talk about some of the pros and cons of flying at night, things to consider as far as equipment and weather and all that jazz. So should be fun to talk about all things night flying. But before that, should we do some news and events?
Well, since Maddie's not here, we'll start it off in her neck of the woods in Wichita, Kansas, with Textron. Textron is, of course, synonymous with Cessna, and they are opening a new career and learning center. The new facility is an important investment, the article says, in building the next generation of aviation manufacturing. The CEO of Textron, Ron Draper, says that this will help keep them in the forefront of the general aviation world and will also highlight the economic and national security benefits of manufacturing in Kansas. He also says that this new facility will help, quote, allow individuals and families to live the American dream. I guess if Americans aren't dreaming about aviation, then what are they even dreaming?
That's not America I want to live in.
Exactly. Kansas Governor Laura Kelly gave her 2 cents on the new project, saying, quote, my goal has always been to make Kansas the best place in the country to live, to work, and to raise a family. And that means staying focused on what works. Talking, of course, about keeping Textron in the forefront of aviation, both here in America and around the world.
Jumping over to Minnesota, let's talk about the Minnesota National Guard and their helicopter crews that are joining some wildfire training up at Camp Ripley. So a couple weeks ago, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources and the Minnesota National Guard participated in some training where their helicopter pilots set up like a mock base to practice wildfire firefighting. So they used Chinook helicopters from the Minnesota National Guard using helicopter buckets that they sometimes lovingly refer to as the Bambi bucket, which is made of a durable, fire-resistant fiberglass material and metal. It's collapsible, lightweight, and it carries a lot of water that you can dump on a fire. According to the National Wildfire Institute, there's been a shift in dynamics of wildfires, which makes this kind of training all the more important. While, at least in our part of the country, there are fewer fires, they have become more expansive and intense in how they're burning. A quick response to those things is fairly important. So the cooperative training involved aircraft not just from the National Guard, but also from the Minnesota DNR that acted as an air attack spotter plane, involved Chinooks and 6 Black Hawk helicopters that participated in the simulated state activation. The training also offered not just the air crews, but also support personnel an opportunity to work directly with DNR firefighting assets, air-to-ground communications, and much more. So it was a good coordinated effort to practice how they would respond to these types of emergencies.
We're keeping Michigan location broad right now because there's a couple of events coming up featuring the TBM Avenger and a reunion of quite a few Avengers. The TBM Avenger reunion has teamed up with Thunder Over Michigan Air Show to gather what they're saying is the largest possible number of TBF and TBM Avengers from across the United States. Starting with May 16th and 17th, the 10th annual TBM Avenger reunion and salute to veterans will be taking place, including not only more than 10 Avengers, but the U.S. Air Force F-16 Viper demo team, and a performance by the Titan aerobatic team, formerly known as the Aeroshell team. Then a month later is when the Thunder Over Michigan Air Show is held on June 20th through 22nd. That's going to be at the Willow Run Airport. The show's official theme is Adventure Awesomeness, and it aims to be the world's largest gathering of Grumman TBF Avengers. That show will also feature the U.S. Navy Blue Angels, at least 12 Avengers, and the U.S. Air Force F-22 Raptor demo team. So maybe Raz will be there.
Raz, I think, rotated off the team.
No kidding.
I think they got a new pilot this year. Yeah.
There will never be another Raz.
Fair.
So the show is in its 10th edition right now, and they're saying it could be the largest gathering of Avengers since 2004, where the record still stands from that year of gathering 12 Avengers.
I just keep thinking of the Marvel Universe for some reason. I don't.
Gee, I wonder why. They have a history of gathering large amounts of historically significant and also rare aircraft, including holding the world's largest gathering of B-17 Flying Fortresses, which was 8, and that was in both 2005 and 2010. And then in 2019, the largest assembly of F4U Corsairs, which was 11 of them. One of the highlights of both of the 2025 events will be Dennis Sanders' TBM Avenger traveling all the way to Michigan from California. So we'll put a link in the show notes to this and all the other stories, but this story in particular will list all of the different Avengers that will be there, including their owners and pilots.
Cool.
Ooh, and a ride's available in one of them.
Looks like you're heading to Michigan.
I think so.
Well, this next story is not in Michigan, but it's kind of a neighbor. Illinois. 7 aviation technology students from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale went to a competition in Atlanta for aerospace maintenance. The team, which they referred to as the Detail Dogs, placed in the top 10 in 6 different events. There were 86 teams that participated from 8 different countries, and they competed in 27 different events, all related to current and future aviation maintenance type of things. I'm sucking at that. This is why you guys read the news. Competition consisted of all these different events, including things such as avionic and electrical troubleshooting, standard engine fan blade removal, thrust reverser control fault troubleshooting and repair, fuel nozzle replacement, cargo door floor locks, and lots more. All things that are really important that I don't know that I'd be able to pull off. At any rate, the team placed in a top 10 in several events, including that avionics troubleshooting, APU starter and render safe, safety wire, and rigid tube assembly repair. They also got the opportunity to tour some of the facilities at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. So good for them. Sounds like a really fun event. Sounds like they did really well for themselves. And I think that not enough is said about the importance of those maintainers out there that help keep our aircraft in the skies. All right, that'll have it for our news and events. So I think this is going to lead us into our episode topic for this evening. As we get into nicer flying weather, certainly flying at night can offer us some really cool opportunities too. The air is smoother at night. You can have some really breathtaking views. And let's be honest, night flight is kind of fun. It's calm, it's relaxing. It's like therapy in an airplane. I think we should start with the fun stuff. So, night flight.
We should start with the fun stuff.
We should, and then we'll
if we start with the not fun stuff, people will just leave,
and no one will want to fly at night ever again. Like, screw this. Right. This sounds like a lot. What are your thoughts on night flight? You a fan? Would you rather fly during the day or both? Fly both.
Ooh, yeah, those sunset flights where it becomes night. I personally love flying at night. I know there are those out there that aren't a huge fan of it because, and we'll talk about the not so fun stuff with it, but I love it. I think it's beautiful. I think it's one of the freedoms that we have. Actually, you've never asked me if I could meet anyone in aviation, dead or alive, but I'm going to do it.
If you could.
But if I could, I'm going to just tell you right now, if I could meet anybody, it would be Jack Knight. And in my mind, he is the reason we are able to fly at night without any other endorsements or ratings or anything like that. A freedom that we enjoy here in America that other countries don't get.
That is true. You have to sometimes in other countries have additional ratings and endorsements and such.
Exactly. So those not familiar with Jack Knight, he was one of the pioneers in mail service aviation. And very early on in aviation, we were trying to find a way as a country to be able to fly at night and still navigate. They didn't have GPS. They didn't have VORs. They didn't have any sort of way to navigate other than looking out the windows. Mm-hmm. And so how do you do that at night when you can't see the landscape? Well, they built this network of bonfires. And these pilots all went out to try and fly coast to coast at night using these fire beacons, these giant bonfires. And Jack Knight was the only one that made it. He's the only one that made it coast to coast. There's a story of when he got to Omaha, they had trouble getting the fire lit, so he had to circle around for a while. And the exact details escape me, but eventually he landed somewhere and he was fine. But he's the only one that was able to do it using these fire beacons. And that's what prompted the FAA to realize we need a more advanced system. So they came up, Yeah. So, and that was the very beginnings of the lighted beacons that we're familiar with seeing today. So just the
I didn't
history
know
of
that.
night flying in America. Yeah. The history of night flying in America has always intrigued me, and just the freedom that we enjoy that most people around the world don't.
Yeah.
I thought was really cool. So that
Yeah, that is
was
really
my
That's your if you could meet anyone in aviation, dead or alive.
yes.
And a great commentary about night flying.
Yeah.
It's a win.
I actually tried to set out. I was thinking maybe those like the fire beacon platforms might still be out there, just like the big arrows that were on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're not. They're all gone.
Most of them are probably gone, I'd imagine. I mean, the same thing's true for those arrows. A lot of them are gone. But
they are.
That's a different topic for a different episode.
Yes.
For me, what I like about night flight is just it's so calming, I think. Especially if you've had kind of a warmer summer day and you've got a little bit of bumping around. The air just it seems so much smoother. There's where I fly, at least, there's a lot to look at. With the lights on the ground, as long as you don't go too far north into the abyss of northern Minnesota, where there's not as many cities. But it's kind of interesting because you look at a VFR sectional chart and you've got kind of like the little dots of yellow where the cities and infrastructure and stuff are at, even in those more remote areas. And you can really pick those out a little bit cleaner at night. Granted, everything else around it is black, but you can pick out those little city centers or towns as you're making your way across, like across country at night. So I think that's kind of neat to be able to look a little bit further ahead than I might be able to look at during the day. And I just think the whole atmosphere is just, it's a pretty chill vibe, for lack of better terms. I mean, ATC is not as busy with traffic, and it's just, I don't know, I find it particularly relaxing. I don't do it enough, but I find night flight to be pretty relaxing.
Yeah, I do too.
Do you have any specific positive memories of night flights? Specific instances that stand out as like, this is awesome, this is why we fly at night?
I think probably my last night flight, which I talked about in one of the previous episodes, with taking my parents and doing the Milwaukee skyline.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, doing the Chicago skyline at night. I flew that
cool.
on it was super cool. I did a pilots and pause flight with Ed from the Flying Stampede, and
Hi
Ed. Yeah, we did both directions after dark, which was super cool too. And I look at big city skylines and I'm like, whatever, but getting that perspective from the air is really cool.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would say for me, probably my night cross country that we did when I was in my initial flight training. We went over the top of MSP. They let us enter the Bravo and cut through to go south of the Twin Cities Metro. But we flew over the Minnesota State Fair during the Minnesota State Fair. And I remember my instructor looking out and go, oh, looks like there's a little carnival down there. I'm like, I think that's like the state fair. Huge Ferris wheel and all these lights. And it was just, it was cool to see that from our vantage point above. But also, those not familiar with the Twin Cities, obviously there's two of them, splitting the cities and having Minneapolis on the one side, St. Paul on the other for the two downtowns, as we then flew right over the top of MSP at night. It was just, that was a really cool experience to me. And to have that be one of my first night flight experiences was something pretty special. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, if we're going to talk about night, we should probably talk about what night is. So, Mr. Studying to be a future CFI, can you name the 3 types of night?
I would love to talk about how the FAA can't have one specific definition for night. I also will put a disclaimer in here that even though I'm studying to be a CFI, it doesn't mean that I am a CFI, nor does it mean that I'm your CFI. So don't just take our word for it. Consult with a certificated flight instructor for your professional flight instruction or the FARs. There, disclaimer out of the way. You can't hold me responsible for anything now. I don't, and this is maybe some of my, this could be an aviation unpopular opinion, but I think everybody probably thinks the same way. There are so many different ways that night can be defined. We talk about the end of evening civil twilight to the beginning of morning civil twilight, or sunrise to sunset, or an hour after sunset to an hour before sunrise. I mean, like, let's just try to boil this down into the simplest way that we can. If you're going to be quote unquote operating at night, it's defined by civil twilight, which is 30 minutes after official sunset to 30 minutes before official sunrise. Now, if we're talking flying with passengers, for currency at least, 3 takeoffs and landings to full stop in the last 90 days. You also can't log landings until 1 hour after sunset to 1 hour before sunrise. So now we have a different definition to throw in there, right? Because it's not complicated enough.
Want to make it more complicated?
I would love to.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You can log a night landing if it's during civil twilight, but that landing does not count towards your night currency. Is that right?
You're gonna make me really think, and I don't want to be wrong on a podcast. So let me see here. It's probably in my notes.
Let's just pose it as a question and have people answer in the Discord.
Oh, there you go. Get comments.
Because people sitting behind a keyboard typing on the internet are always right.
Also correct.
I'm sorry. Continue.
Well, technically, if you look at the definition of civil twilight, it's 30 minutes after sunset, right? While for currency for flying passengers, it's 1 hour after sunset. So you might not be able to log it for currency, but it looks like, according to civil twilight, there's a 30-minute gap there.
Yeah, and so for my sake,
might
just
not know what I'm talking about, though. I'm going to have to look that up. So if you don't hear that in the episode, you know that I had it wrong.
Well, I know, just to keep it easy for tracking in my logbook and for my own record keeping, I just don't actually log it as a night landing unless it's after an hour after sunset.
I did that as non-boring as I possibly could.
Yeah, I like to think of it rather than what is night. I think of it as just darkness, like what versions of darkness. So sunset is navigation lights, 30 minutes is time. Yeah. Like you can log the time, and an hour after is when I log the landings.
Yeah. Yeah. Sunrise to sunset, you need those additional equipment items. So,
or vice versa, sunset to sunrise. But yeah.
I knew what I meant.
Yeah.
Yes. Sunset
so
to
do
sunrise.
The listeners,
you need the,
which is why we put the disclaimer out.
Correct. That I have no idea what I'm talking about. Let's say we're going to take a night flight. What are some ways that you, Badger, prepare yourself for a night flight? Anything different that you do?
I'm sure I should say there are. But I'll be honest, I don't. I take a little bit closer look at the weather. And that's a big one for me because again, things I shouldn't say on a public forum. I don't have a set list of personal minimums, but I definitely look a lot closer at ceilings because inadvertent flight in the VMC and the IMC is bad enough. And then you add into night, you don't even know it's coming. Like, let's face it, you're probably not going to be able to see that cloud. So I definitely take a closer look at weather. Okay. And then I'll also look and see if there's any instrument approaches into that airport I'm going to, specifically an ILS, because I don't have a GPS in my plane. So an ILS is the only thing that's going to give me lateral and vertical guidance. But truthfully, other than that, probably a closer look at the taxiways diagrams, just so I know which gap in the blue lights I'm aiming for.
True.
And I don't know, maybe I'm on the lazy side of that, but what am I missing, Jim? What should I be doing that I'm not?
Well, I know for me, like, let's talk like night vision, right? Because that's a big part of it too, because your eyes are going to take at least 30 minutes to adjust to dark environments. Based on the rods and the cones and which part of our eye we're using to see, you're going to need like 30 minutes to really adapt to the darker environment. So for me, the nice thing with our hangar setup, and I know not everyone's hangar is set up the same way or their flight line or whatever, but just me personally, our hangar is set up that we've got our really bright like main lights that we can have on that really light the place up. But there's also a center row of lights that are just more like your incandescent light bulbs that are just, they're not as bright. They make it just like a nice dim glow across the hangar so that we can pre-flight for night in conditions that aren't like blinding us or having to use just a flashlight. So that's a big thing as far as the night vision thing. I'll also say, prepping my iPad for night mode so it's not like super bright. and blinding me while I'm flying. Just those little things to protect your night vision before you get out onto the ramp itself. Yeah, I think that those are the big things. And the same thing that you said as far as looking at the weather. The one thing I look at really close is that temp dew point spread, especially in the summer months.
Yeah, sure.
So that I'm not going to have a fog incident. We'll cover that a little bit more in depth as we get a little bit on. But those are just some of my initial pre-flight stuff.
And that kind of transitions nicely to equipment too. I mean, we always hear about don't use white light, use red light. So if you've got, like, I have a red reading light that I keep in the plane, but if I don't take it out, I forget to charge it. So make sure, my red light is charged so that I'm like, oh no, my light's out. Now I have to use my cell phone light, which is a bright white light. And,
it sure is.
It sure ruins everything else.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I think on that same note with flashlights, there's a lot of talk about how like the red lens is going to wash out certain things on a sectional chart, which is true. But with having an electronic flight bag, that's one of the perks that you have with that. You can set up like a night mode so that you're not going to have that washout like you would. I think the other thing that would be important with your flashlights is thinking in the sense of plural for flashlights, not just one. The old adage of 2 is 1, 1 is none. Because if that flashlight that you have that you only brought the one dies, now you have no flashlight unless you're going to use your phone with the bright light. The other thing that I really like is a headlamp. You're not having to fiddle around as much with a flashlight. So once I'm in the plane and like actually physically flying or operating the aircraft, that headlamp is my go-to for a light. And then my backup is, that little handheld flashlight that I would use. It's one less thing to have to be putzing around with in the plane, figuring out where your flashlight's at or holding it between your shoulder and your face while you're trying to do something, or in your teeth. I know that some people like bite down on their flashlight to hold it and point it at a chart. I mean, like, get a headlamp. They're awesome. I think in that same space, extra batteries. I typically try to fly with extra batteries anyways, but I'll be honest, if it's a short hop during the day, I'm not as diligent about how many batteries I have. I'll have probably just enough to pop them into my headset if the batteries die on that. Beyond that, I'm not carrying a bunch of batteries for flashlights because it's daytime. I don't need a flashlight, right? Yeah, so I mean, as far as like pilot equipment, those are the big things. Do we want to talk a bit about the additional nighttime equipment that you need? There's the old, because we love acronyms so much. We love them. Acronyms are the best. Flaps. That's right. Do you know what they are?
Let's see if I can remember this. So,
missed opportunity.
Flaps.
You should have done the airplane thing. They're a thing that slowed you down.
All right. Yeah.
The back of your wings, but that's not important right now.
That's not important right now. Okay. Fuses comes to mind.
That's because that's what's on there first. Spare fuses.
Perfect. Fuses. So spare fuses.
Uh-huh.
The L would be landing light.
Uh-huh.
Which reminds me, I need to go practice landing a plane at night without a working landing light, but whatever. All right. FLA. Anti-collision light.
Yep.
Which, do you know why, by the way, anti-collision light is listed both on A Tomatoes Flame or Tomatoes of Flame or A Tomatoes Flame? Tomato
Why
Flames.
Is that, Badger?
Why is it on both lists?
Why is it on both lists?
Because some planes are exempt from the daytime anti-collision light because they're so old and they were manufactured before that became a thing, but they still needed it for night flight. At least that's what I was told at one time.
I think that's accurate because on the daytime rule, there is that window of if manufactured before such and such a date. It's not required.
Okay. P.
You're at P.
Position lights.
Yep. And that's one of those fun definition items for nighttime.
Yep.
Sunrise to sunset. Nope. Wrong. Sunset to sunrise. I did it again.
Or in my case, anytime you need ADSB out because my ADSB out is it's connected to it. It replaced one of my nav lights.
Okay.
So
I
there you go.
fly with them on anyways, but
yeah. And last but not least, S is source of power.
Man, you got them. Nailed it.
I remembered.
You passed your pop quiz. Good job.
You know what? I hope whoever my eventual commercial DPE is heard that and
It
doesn't
just
need to ask
processes
me
off
to.
the list.
Yeah.
Your oral's going to get so much quicker if we just do episodes talking about various items
Right.
in the ACS.
Right.
Well, in episode number 87, I heard you talk about airport lighting, so we can scratch that off.
Right.
Oh man.
I have a question for you, Jim.
Bring it on.
Is there anything differently you do as far as the flight itself and I guess people watching over you, whether it's ATC, whether it's flight service, whether it's just letting an additional person know what the plan is?
A lot of times, I can't remember if it was this podcast or the other one where I talked about that more often than not, I am either on flight following or I'm on the frequency for the area that I'm at. So, for example, if I'm just doing a local flight and I go north of where our tower is typically watching, I'm going to switch over to the Minneapolis approach frequency that covers that area. Then at least if someone else is around me that they're talking to and pointing me out, at least I know they're talking about me. And if I have to, I can jump on frequency. This is a thing that I think our friends over at Opposing Bases have been trying to advocate for, of like what did they call it? There's some fancy phrase that they made up because they're all
flight
about
following light.
Flight following light. That's exactly what it was, where you know the frequency you're monitoring, and if they really want to call you, they can. I kind of do that anyways. I'm listening to the frequency for that area. If I'm going to be loitering there for a while, like say that I'm going to go up, even during the daytime, I'm going to go up and practice steep turns, slow flight, whatever, in an area that's not typically going to be where my tower's watching. I know that Minneapolis approach is just north of there, so I'm going to have that on and I'm going to listen to that in case, again, they start saying things that I need to be aware of. Because our practice area does kind of crisscross over one of the approaches into Anoka. So if they have someone practicing an approach, say one of the 1-8 approaches, I would like to not be in their way.
Yeah.
So let's just loiter over the final approach fix.
Right.
But most student pilots aren't necessarily going to be aware of that because you're not thinking about instrument flight plans and instrument approaches. So they're going to go and do their thing. But at any rate, no, that is something that I do kind of either way. I guess that wasn't a really good answer to your question, but I am almost always on a frequency with air traffic control, whether I'm talking to them or I'm just monitoring. And that's a personal thing for me. It's an extra piece of comfort and knowing that I can just, if I'm in a bind, I just call them up. They're there to help.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm pretty much the same way too. I will say there are some daytime cross-country flights that I've made the decision not to be on flight following, but nighttime I want to talk to somebody all the time.
Yeah. Well, especially if you have an issue at night and you need like vectoring to an airport close by.
Yep.
Like, I can't see where things are at. Please vector me to this airport.
Yep.
Good point. Let's see here. I want to cover one more thing just in equipment. Just from a personal anecdote standpoint of knowing your equipment in your aircraft. If you don't know how to turn on your red lights, if you've got a red cabin light, or you don't know how to turn down the brightness on the fancy GPS that someone had installed in a club plane, that can be problematic. I think I've told this story in prior episodes about flying out of a black hole airport with a GPS unit that we couldn't figure out how to turn on the brightness. It was a plane I don't normally fly, and my instructor had to hold her mitten over the panel or over the. She had to hold her mitten over the GPS unit to block out the light because it was so bright and it was so dark out that like we could have been in a bad situation real quick if I didn't get immediately into the instruments.
Wow!
And even then, I'm like, it is so bright. Like the mitten would only cover up so much of this panel, and there was still light leaking out. And it was just that was a very long flight. Because it was the 2-hour commercial night flight. So it's 2 hours with that thing.
Perfect.
Yeah. We figured it out. But it just, that was an important learning moment for me of knowing your equipment. If you don't know how to operate something, ask the question.
Yeah.
Or look it up.
Or dig into the manual.
Before you are in there flying.
Yes.
Going, I can't see anything. It's too bright in
here.
Yeah. That is an instance where I wish I had my sunglasses at night.
There you go.
That thing was so bright.
But that brings up a good point, too. Even if you're not an instrument-rated pilot, having a comfort level with instrument flying is so key. whether you're leaving out of a black hole airport, like you said, or flying over even just a small body of water where you lose the horizon.
Yeah.
Or we talked about city lights earlier, how they might appear to be a horizon, but they're diagonal and they're not. And trusting your instruments too.
That's an interesting segue of something we don't have in our show notes of the optical illusions that are out there.
Oh, and what are the optical? I actually used to know all of these. I should probably remember them.
Well, you talked already about featureless terrain a bit. Like there's nothing for you to reference. So, that's one of them. False horizon is what you were just talking about, where you see like this line of lights and you think this is a horizon, but it's not quite straight. And people have gotten to a bind with that. Stars can sometimes be indistinguishable from the ground. You might be looking at some really bright stars because you're in a really dark place, and that can be kind of misinterpreted for ground lights. Autokinesis. I don't want to get into every single one.
Autokinesis. That's where like the lights look like they're moving. The stars look like they're moving.
That's staring at a single stationary object until it goes away.
Oh.
This is a great way to experience this if you don't know what this means and you haven't experienced it. If you are sitting alone at night, this is when I was a kid. I don't know why I did this, but we had the smoke detector in my room that had the little red light that was on all the time if there was battery power to it. If you stare at that long enough when you're 12 years old because there's nothing better to do and you can't fall asleep, eventually if you stare directly at it, it disappears. So if you've never experienced it, that's a really cool way to kind of test that out on your own.
Oh, nice.
And it works. If I did it tonight, the same thing would happen. And that's where we kind of get into, as you're flying at night, your scanning has to be different. You can't stare directly at the light of the aircraft that you might see in front of you. You need to take that off-center view of things. That kind of covers your autokinesis of staring at a light until it disappears. So
I think rather than hashing out each and every one of these, we'll just refer our listeners to the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. And
yes.
You can read up on that. But those are real things. And if it's something you want to experience, go up with an instructor. My first night flight ever as a student pilot, my instructor, he wasn't my full time, he was a sub in for the night.
But I'm glad. Instructor.
Yeah, but he was like, "Oh, let's just go take off and turn out east a little bit," which anybody from southeastern Wisconsin knows. If you're going east, you're going to the lake.
And you sure are.
Yeah, and he wanted to see what I would do when I got over the lake on a relatively moonless night and there's no horizon. He said, "This is how I do it every time for a first-time night student, just to see what they do." And it either instills, okay, they've got a decent like set of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, okay, they've got a decent grasp on sort of looking at the instruments as opposed to looking out the window, versus really hammering home like you can't trust what you're seeing out the window. So it was a really good lesson.
That's a bold strategy, though.
It is.
If I mean, I'm getting into a different topic with the fundamentals of instruction, but if you're playing with Maslow's hierarchy of needs a little bit with your safety and sense of security on that first night flight, that could shut somebody down. And that maybe isn't the intended consequence, but like, it's like, do you got what it take, kid? Let's fly over the lake and find out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Me personally, again, not an instructor yet, but I would ease them into that and go, hey, like, here's the thing that can happen at night flight. You need to know the importance of becoming disoriented, and we're going to fly into a situation where this is where people get into spatial disorientation. We're going to go out there. We're going to practice it. I'm with you. We're going to be safe. If I have to, I'll take the plane back, but you have to experience this at some point to understand, how serious night flying can be and how it can go south on you. But it wouldn't be my first lesson at night. Me personally.
Especially, God, that train just will not stop. It's going that much.
Or he's screwing with you. Like, you know what? That Roger pilot, I'm going to give a taste of his own medicine here. You want to do night flight and fly over my house at night when I'm trying to sleep? I got a train horn for you while you're trying to record.
Right.
Probably not likely scenario.
Yeah, not only just a first night lesson, but this was my first flight with this instructor, so
Yeah.
he had no idea. Like
how are you going to react?
Exactly. So it worked out.
Not Jim's approach. I'll just put that out there. But hey, to each their own. Again, he's an instructor. I'm not yet.
So we've talked about this in other episodes in the past about the biggest hazard of flying at night is what to do if you lose your engine and you only have one to begin with at night. And I think we kind of touched on it a little bit, and that's talking to ATC. They're going to be your best friend and guiding you towards a potentially maybe not safe per se, but less dangerous area to put the plane down. I will say this. I heard in, I think, a podcast somewhere, somebody suggested doing power off 180s at night just to kind of practice to practice and simulate like an engine out scenario. I don't know if I'm super on board with that, but hey, if someone wants to get with a CFI and try it, maybe I put an idea in your head that you wouldn't have thought of before, but I don't know. Tread carefully.
You have to really know your airport, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
I don't know if that's a terrible idea. If you know your airport, you know the obstructions around, but if you're going to... I'm not a huge fan of it, but...
I'm not either. We're not endorsing it. We're not endorsing it per se, but know that there are those out there that say to try it.
I think also with the engine situation, a lot of pilots I talk to hear more problems with their engine at night than any other time that they're flying. And more often than not really a problem, but like, what was that? It's so dark. What was that? What's my engine doing? I don't know. I fly a little bit more rich at night than I would otherwise, just because if I hear a little bump in the night, I see what I did there. I'll bump in a little bit more mixture because I'm not going to go as lean, I think, just because it's probably a mental thing, and I probably fall under spark plugs. But if it sounds like it's running a little rough, I just bump in a little bit more mixture, and it seems to figure itself out. So, but yeah, I think you're more prone to hear problems with your engine at nighttime than any other time, even though they're not real. So we talk about the visual illusions. I think there's the auditory illusions of my engine's going to quit any second. It's just look at your gauges, trust your instruments. If everything looks like it's in the green and you bump in a little bit more mixture and it works, you're probably fine. If you're in a black hole situation, that you don't have a whole ton of options. If you're able to if you've got a GPS, if you've got a good sectional that can maybe help you know where some stuff's at, that might help, or vector into an airport if you're talking to ATC like we talked about. But even lights from roadways can be helpful to try to figure out a nice place to land if that's an option. The only troublesome part with roads is sometimes power lines cross those things. So pros and cons to roads.
And then, of course, there's the old adage, if you lose your engine at night and you're gliding down to what you think is going to be your spot to put it down, if you don't like what you see ahead of you, just turn your landing light off.
I think on that note, though, I might be a little bit more prone to zigzag a little bit, or at least be intimately familiar with where the next airport's going to be on a cross country at night. I'm probably keeping better tabs on my charts and on my GPS on where that next airport's at than I might during the day, just so that I have a plan should something go wrong, that hopefully I can make it to the next airport. We talked a bit about weather already, but do we want to cover anything else here, or do we just leave what we had with weather before? We talked about dew point spread. You talked about clouds.
I think the only thing I would add is for the instrument pilots, trying to make that decision of, if I'm in the clouds at night, what lights on the plane will I have on? Mm-hmm. You know, I've heard that a landing light, you get that splash back into the cabin and it potentially affects your night vision. I've heard from others saying it's not so bad. The big one is strobes. If you have strobes on your plane, that's the time you want to turn them off. So if you are an instrument pilot who's flown in the clouds at night, I'd actually be really curious to hear your thoughts on it in the Discord, because that's something that I haven't been able to experience before.
Yeah, nor have I. I haven't intentionally done any IMC while I was flying at night yet. I shouldn't say most. All of my night flights have been VFR, which is fine by me, because I talked about at the very outset, like I like looking out the window at night and seeing all the cool stuff out there. But I also don't have like a need to fly at night in the clouds at this point in my aviation journey. So
It says
All right.
it says here though that you have a fog story.
oh, you're looking at the show notes. I do have a fog story.
Yeah, I know you're shocked. I'm looking at the plan for the episode.
I'm not used to you looking at the show notes. So nice job, buddy.
Yeah.
No, that same night flight I talked about, my very first one where I flew down to the South Metro, we had a temp dew point spread that was really, really close. As we got down there, we were going to do 3 takeoffs and landings at this airport down there as well, just to get some of those reps in. After the second one, as we're taking off, the fog was really starting to roll in to the point where like we were about to do the third one, and then there was just too much fog across the runway. I mean, we could still make out the lights of the airport, but it wasn't a good idea to continue because knowing that it was already rolling in, I didn't know how much else was out there, like over the farm fields and stuff. So we aborted that third landing. I mean, we had the luxury of being able to do that. We were just going to head back north anyways after 3 landings. So, but something to keep in mind is sometimes that fog can sneak in on you when that temp dew point spread is really, really close together in those summer months, especially. So that's my fog story. There was no foghorn either, so I didn't know. And now Badger's gone. And I'm alone. So as I was talking, either what I was talking about was so boring to Badger that he left, or Wisconsin Wi-Fi strikes again because he dropped right off the call. That is probably good a time as any to transition out of this episode. Hopefully you took something away from this episode about night flying. If you have some comments, thoughts, etc., and want to reach out to us, the best way to do that is to join us in our Discord community, and you can leave some comments. We can have some discussion about your thoughts on night flying. You can do that by sending us an email at flyingmidwestpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll send you a link for the Discord. You can also join us in our Patreon community where you can financially support the podcast. We have a number of different groups, and it gives you access to not just exclusive bonus content and early releases for this podcast, but also for Fly the Transition and as well as the Aero Exploration YouTube channel. If you are interested in being a future guest or if you have a future show topic, you can also contact us at flyingmidwestpodcast@gmail.com and share your thoughts for a future episode or offer to be a guest. And finally, this is my call to action that I throw at you every episode. Please like and subscribe to the podcast and leave us a 5-star rating and a review. If you leave us a review, we will be happy to read that in a future episode. So on behalf of the now absent Badger pilot, thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the Flying Midwest Podcast. And until next time, see ya!
Flight Chef 536, contact Minneapolis Center 132.35. Good day.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Flying Midwest Podcast. Until next time, podcast service terminated, squawk VFR, frequency change approved. Good day.
I guess if I'm actually prepared to read the news, then you don't get to hear me sing.
That is my favorite part. I put it in the bloopers. Something about this.
There, I turned a political statement into non-political.
Good work, because we are not a political podcast. We're definitely nonpartisan.
We are neither right-wing nor left-wing. We are hashtag Team Low-wing.
I think that both wings are required for flight.
Yes.
All right. The competition provided them an opportunity. See? They're arguing, aren't they?
Oh, you hear that,
Having a good
right?
time.
You can- yeah.
The Badger children are upsetting the set. There is a disturbance in the set. Okay. That wasn't that hard to say, was it?
No, that's okay.
But somehow
I've been trying to sit be. I do that on the radio, by the way. If I stumble across something, I just go and continue on. And only my students have looked at me funny. So far, ATC
Because you
has
can't
taken
see everyone else looking at you funny, but they're like, "What the hell is that?"
Well, ATC never says anything. They're champs about it.
They're
Anyway.
mortified is why. They're just like, I have nothing. I don't know what
That's valid.
Sorry. I'm done.
It's okay.
There's a
There's a
train.
train. No, your
I got
peripheral
kids
vision-
screaming. I got dogs
Kids
barking.
screaming,
I got
trains.
trains going.
Man, Milwaukee is just a mess. Let's see here. I'm going to do a badger move and go choo-choo-choo-choo-choo-choo.
So we've talked about this in other episodes, but obviously the biggest hazard, Hazard?
Hazard.
Dukes of Hazzard?
Succotash.